Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Thanks, everyone, for joining us here tonight. And a special welcome to anyone new out there who might be watching. Oh, we have so much to talk about this evening. And I don't know if and I told you so is in order. Probably not, but I told you so. At least I think I told you so. I said from the very beginning that this coup, as it is being described in mainstream media in the West, or this attempted coup in Russia, might actually have been partially manipulated by the United States CIA. And now, other voices who have been saying that or are now adding their voices to that are being heard on social media and elsewhere this evening. So I'm not alone. There are some very credible people who are also saying that. I'm not sure when they started saying it. I think some of them probably from the very beginning, but certainly they're getting some attention tonight. We're going to talk about the aftermath of the attempted coup again this evening, and we have some riveting video to go along with this commentary, this op-ed and recap of the events from the past couple of days. So stick around for that. Also tonight, climate change. Climate change. It's supposed to be making dogs vicious. Climate change. So I have a special report for you on that tonight. That's coming up later in the broadcast. An exclusive investigation into that very matter right here on the Maverick News Channel. Don't go away. Tonight's show is going to be a blockbuster.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Too late. Too late. Too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Was it a coup or was it an attempted coup? Was it what was that we witnessed, that the world witnessed over the past couple of days? This rebellion in Russia with the Wagner forces. What was that? I don't think it was exactly a coup. I'll tell you this. Right from the beginning, I said something about this just smells just a little bit. This has all the earmarks of a CIA operation. if not in its entirety, certainly there appears to be, to me, probably some CIA manipulation going on here. And I think that's, I still stand by that. I said the head of the Wagner Group probably was approached by the CIA because he's basically a mercenary, a hired gun, and might have been just offered more money or a better deal. He was willing to make himself a tool of the West, of the United States, of NATO for the bucks. I'm not so sure that that is exactly what happened. I also said that the other possibility and the likely thing was that there was some sort of information warfare going on, not mass information warfare, but highly targeted information warfare designed to manipulate and control to some degree, to steer events, to convince Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, of certain information to make him think that his forces were being attacked by Russian military. It made no sense in my mind for the Russian military to be attacking Wagner groups as Prigozhin had accused the Russian military of doing. He said that there was an attack against his troops from behind at one point. Now, there was also a video out there that showed that there was some sort of it's supposed to be a missile strike. There's no way that the damage in this wooded area that they showed in this video was the result of a missile strike. So that didn't make sense either. Why would he show that? I don't know. He was trying to justify, his actions, this convoy. I'm calling it a convoy of military vehicles that they were taking to Moscow. Let me just back it all up here a little bit and kind of get the lay of the land for you again, and then we're going to play. We're gonna come back. We've got clips tonight of some dynamic video and comments made today by Secretary of State Antony Blinken in the aftermath of this, and that are very significant and are directly related to what I'm talking about here. But you have to recall that, boy, it's got to be about 4 or 6 weeks ago, we were interviewing Regis Tremblay, journalist who works in Russia now. He's American born, but living in Russia. And back at that point, Regis had taken note of media reports that were widely being distributed, focusing on a video that Prigozhin had made where he was criticizing the Russian military and top brass in the Russian military of not providing enough ammunition. And these were caustic remarks, unprecedented, dangerous, really. And it took real cojones for Prigozhin to make that video and to say the things that he was saying. It put him in direct odds with Russian military top brass. But it also showed how important the Wagner forces were, how important they had become to Russia in this special military operation taking place in Ukraine, and especially in the Donbass. The Wagner forces have been there for years, providing defense for Russian-speaking people in the Donbass as they were being attacked since about 2014 by Ukrainian forces. So Prigozhin was ramping things up with the defense minister Shoigu even back then, and they have a long history of friction. They do not get along. They're adversaries, internal squabbling for a very long time. And the Wagner Group, of course, is a mercenary armed force, and Prigozhin owns it. We know that Prigozhin has been involved in a lot of different kinds of businesses. Many of them, well, he started out in the catering business and graduated to owning the Wagner Group, starting with 1,000 mercenaries, soldiers of fortune to begin with. And now he commands a force somewhere in the vicinity of about apparently 40,000 in total soldiers. Estimates and total numbers vary. But over time, the Wagner forces have become extremely important. They've been instrumental in this battle against Ukraine uh, as part of this special military operation. In fact, I would say that there is ample evidence to suggest that it's the Wagner forces that have done maybe even the bulk of the fighting to secure a lot of the territory that they have, especially in Bakhmut. If it wasn't for the Wagner forces, the Bakhmut battle, which is the longest battle that has taken place so far in this Ukrainian conflict, it's the Wagner forces that have secured that area. But through all of this, there's been this friction. And we know that US intelligence now is saying that when Prigozhin was criticizing the Russian military for not sending enough ammunition, US intelligence is saying that he was actually stockpiling while asking for more to build up to his ammunition reserves, because he apparently had been, according to the US military intelligence, they're saying that he had been building toward doing something, and they were aware that he was planning to do something, and there were briefings that had been taking place prior to this attempted coup, as they are, calling it. But I said too, as this was unfolding, and I said it right here, you can go back and look it up, that I wasn't sure if some of the translations that were taking place on social media videos of Prigozhin were accurate. And I'm still not entirely sure because I don't speak Russian. But there were media reports as well that said that he was saying that there would be a new president in Russia by the end of the day. And that was on day one when they were on their way to Moscow. And I don't know if that sounds right. And I said right then, I don't know if that's an accurate statement. But it's because aside from that, everything that he was saying didn't mesh with an assertion that he was going to overthrow Putin. He said all the way along that really what he was doing was going to Moscow to confront corrupt generals who he was accusing of stealing money. And of course, accusations flying back on the other side as well. And he said that it wasn't a coup. He said that it was, I believe, a march for justice. And so they were on their way to Moscow, but they had muzzles still on the ends of the guns for the tanks, the armored vehicles. A lot of this didn't seem to make sense. And then they got within about 120 miles of Moscow, and that's when there was this deal that was brokered with the leader of Belarus, and Prigozhin ordered his troops to stand down, turn around, and head back to the front lines. As a result of this deal, Prigozhin has been promised that no charges will be laid against him. I guess his safety assured. He's being transferred to Belarus, where he will, I think, sort of be in exile, in a manner of speaking. And then there was this, and then the ongoing process, which was part of what precipitated the conflict to begin with, I think. The process of integrating Wagner troops into the actual Russian military will proceed as part of this deal, where Wagner soldiers will be allowed to join the Russian military. But this is all very fluid. It's volatile still tonight. Everything that happened does not seem to, so a lot of it doesn't seem to make sense to me on the surface. But if you step back and look at kind of what happened, you can sort of start to put some pieces together. And one of the things that I always do when I'm trying to assess a story like this is to stand back and say, well, who really benefited the most from what just happened? Russia didn't benefit from this. This was not, this was kind of a public relations fumble in some respects, because as Prigozhin was on his way to Moscow, we saw Vladimir Putin calling it treason, a rebellion. The Russian forces also playing into that narrative, essentially calling this an uprising. Mutiny was another word that was used, a coup. Western media grabbed a hold of this story and really started to run with it. Ukrainian media also grabbed a hold of this, state-run media in Ukraine, and really ran with it. It hurt Russia on the public relations front in the West and in Ukraine. And this really has given the West everything it could have dreamed of, short of an actual overthrow of Putin. But on the public relations front, on the information warfare front, this has given them fuel to continue justifying the NATO position and the United States position on this conflict on their home front, selling it to us, the Canadian, the US, the citizens in the UK, all the NATO countries. That's why I'm sitting here tonight, and I'm still confident that what has happened here is there has been some degree of information warfare that has played out. I'm not alone. I think that attack that Prigozhin was talking about probably was real. He didn't just make it up. And the direction of the attack convinced him that it was Russian forces who were responsible for it. My guess is it wasn't Russian forces. It wasn't Ukrainian forces. My guess is it was NATO, US, CIA shooting at them from a rear position to convince them that other information that they had probably been feeding them was accurate, that it was true, that some sort of cracks had developed in the alliance or the loyalty between Wagner and the government forces, the government-run military. Keeping in mind that Wagner, they're just basically paid soldiers, just private contractors. They're not part of the Russian military. They're just working with the blessing of the Russian military and being supplied with armaments from the Russian military, but they're private guns for hire, man. And that's what they do. They go in and they're paid killers. A brutal fighting force, tough as nails. Prigozhin recruited a lot of his soldiers from prisons, former military people. A lot of them really had nothing to lose by joining, and they're extremely well paid, and they do it for the money. They do it for, honestly, the women and for the status that comes with the power that accompanies that kind of work. Extremely dangerous. If you survive, you take home a really big paycheck. But there were some problems happening, and some suggestions that maybe paychecks weren't even being completely filled. Issues like that, not really clear. We'll never really get, I don't think, the full story on what has been happening. But I'm not the only one thinking that this is part of an information warfare campaign, and we saw the results of that manifest over the last 24 hours or so, maybe 48 hours now. And here's a statement that was issued by Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector, who has been on this program a few times, well respected, understands all of this stuff better than I. He's an expert. And look at what he wrote. He says in this statement, this article that he wrote, he says, failing to create the conditions conducive for the collapse of domestic support for Putin and the Ukrainian conflict by pressuring Russia from without, the collective West began working to create the conditions for bringing down Russia by sowing internal seeds of dissension. This strategy hinged on a very sophisticated information warfare scheme, which simultaneously sought to suppress and discredit narratives which sustained the official position of the Russian government, while building up covert agents of influence within social media outlets deemed to be influential amongst the Russian public. Using these channels, the pro-Ukrainian practitioners of information war began promulgating narratives intended to highlight the failings of the Russian government, and more specifically, persons close to President Putin who were affiliated with the SMO, by focusing their angst on what these channels were highlighting as the failures of the SMO, Special Military Operation. The information warfare practitioners were able to wrap themselves in the mantle of patriotism, claiming only to be looking out for the best interests of Mother Russia, all the while denigrating the character of the constitutional government. So through this narrative, through this information that they were putting out there, they were trying to destabilize the government by undermining public confidence and trust in the government and in the military and in the special military operation that is still ongoing in Ukraine. And as I say, information warfare comes in many, many different forms. And if you can convince someone of something and convince the right people of it, the information will flow from them organically then through a channel of communication, sort of like a grapevine. And especially today, using social media and other methods to communicate information and even manipulating events, you can pull people right down into a rabbit hole pretty easily. You can convince people of a lot of things. So if you can convince Prigozhin that his forces are actually under attack and that there's a lot of corruption going on, and it might even actually be somewhat true, but then show that there's some sort of a direct assault or attack against him personally and his forces, then you can get him to take certain kinds of actions, you see. And I think, honestly, that there is some element of that that has gone on here. It has all the earmarks of that, trying to destabilize the country. And so also tonight, you're seeing the Russian ambassador to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky, also who has been on this program, that tweeting this in response to Michael McFaul, who is a professor of political science, director of Freeman's Spogli Institute, and Hoover Senior Fellow at Stanford University, and U.S. Ambassador to Russia. So he said, I still have so many questions about events in Russia over the last 24 hours, to which Dmitry responds, sorry, it didn't go according to your playbook. We disappointed you. Many more disappointments to come. Stay tuned. So what does that tell me? It tells me that the Russians at very high levels, including with Dmitry Polyansky, they're on to this. They kind of know. Well, I think they absolutely know how the U.S. operates. And I think that they could see what I see, only for them, it's probably much more accurate because they probably have much better intelligence than me. I'm certain they do. But they probably realized early on that this was a situation that was being manipulated to some degree by the CIA. I think that's why we've seen the outcome that we've seen, where it didn't turn into a bloody mess, where it didn't turn into a full-scale coup, where it didn't turn into Prigozhin being arrested, maybe killed, why his forces were allowed to stand down, turn around, and head back, why he is being allowed to go to Belarus. Because Putin kept a level head, stayed calm. In the early hours of this, and for the first full day, he said nothing. He just sat back, waited, observed, assessed, looked at the situation. And then things began to evolve, and there was a negotiation that took place. Olive branches extended, an agreement reached, thanks to Lukashenko from Belarus. A deal struck, a peace deal. Everybody stood down. And now we're all sitting here saying, wow, what was that really all about? Was it actually an attempted coup? Or was it something else? Well, the mainstream media in the West certainly calling it from the very beginning an attempted coup, because that plays into their narrative. From the beginning, I wasn't sure if the word coup was the accurate term to be using. I'm still using it tonight. I think that I have fallen victim to the mainstream media narrative in Canada and especially the United States. I think the public here is victim of it. I think the world has fallen victim to a narrative that portrays this as an attempted coup, an armed rebellion. I'm not sure what the right phrase is, but immediately, I think even Vladimir Putin has maybe made a bit of an error in judgment in the choice of the words that he made when he finally addressed the nation and the world and accused Prigozhin of treason, of mutiny. Those words, in a way, kind of weakened his position. Maybe not substantially on the home front, but internationally, the optics on it were not good because it still suggests that there have been cracks that developed in his hold on power. That is not good for Putin. Again, who does that benefit? It benefits the West. That was, I think, part of the information warfare plan and well executed, but as the plan rolled out, it was not fully executed. They didn't get to the end result. It has, though, created instability within the country, and it has eroded the image of strength that Putin has been projecting globally. It has shaken that. That benefits the West. This is, I think, exactly what they've wanted all along with this. And that's why today Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was on Meet the Press, and he was furthering that exact narrative when interviewed by Chuck Todd. Let's go to that video. This is very recent from today. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Secretary Blinken, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks, Chuck.
Let me just start with your observations. What did we just see over the weekend? And the reason I ask that is because, look, this is a country that misinformation is a feature, not a bug. Sometimes there's theater. What should we believe with what we just witnessed in the last 48 hours in Russia?
Well, Chuck, if you put this in perspective, what we've seen is extraordinary. Think about it this way. 16 months ago, Russian forces were on the doorstep of Kyiv in Ukraine, believing they would take the capital in a matter of days and erase the country from the map as an independent country. Now, what we've seen is Russia having to defend Moscow, its capital, against mercenaries of its own making. So in and of itself, that's extraordinary. And in so doing, we've also seen rise to the surface profound questions about the very premises for this Russian aggression against Ukraine that Prigozhin surfaced very publicly, as well as a direct challenge to Putin's authority. So I think we've seen more cracks emerge in the Russian facade. It is too soon to tell exactly where they go and when they get there. But certainly, we have all sorts of new questions that Putin is going to have to address in the weeks and months ahead.
What was amazing is what wasn't said. Vladimir Putin didn't blame the West for this. Didn't blame it during his very strident speech, nor the after the fact. What do you make of that?
It's hard to put myself in Putin's head or Prigozhin's for that matter. And keep in mind, both individuals are responsible for terrible acts committed against the Ukrainian people. Also, in the case of Wagner, in country after country in Africa, wherever Wagner goes, death and destruction and exploitation follow. But I think it does point to the fact that this is an internal matter. This is a challenge coming from within to Putin. And that's where his focus has been. Our focus is resolutely and relentlessly on Ukraine, making sure that it had what it needs to defend itself and to take back territory that Russia has seized. The president brought together the National Security Cabinet. He brought together our key allies and partners to make sure that the unity of purpose, the unity of action that we've had with regard to Ukraine remains, and it does.
The president of Belarus apparently mediated this. That seemed startling because this is somebody that is portrayed by many Western analysts as simply a puppet of Putin. Puppets don't often mediate their puppeteers here. So what do you make of this? Are we underestimating Belarus here?
Hang on a second here. Let me just, there we go.
I think it's important for us not to speculate, and I suspect that we'll learn more and more in the days and weeks ahead, including the actual details of whatever deal was struck. It may be that Putin didn't want to debase himself to the level of negotiating directly with Prigozhin, so it was useful to get someone like Lukashenko into this on his behalf. But again, that is speculation. We want to avoid that. We want to focus on the facts, and we want to keep the focus on Ukraine.
There were some reports over the weekend that U.S. intelligence analysts seemed to think something was up. What you ended up seeing versus what the intelligence said, how accurate was it?
Well, Chuck, I'm obviously not going to comment on intelligence matters. What I can say is this. I think it's been no secret to many people over many months that these tensions were rising. They were brewing. Prigozhin was already saying some rather extraordinary things about Russia's conduct of the war in Ukraine and going directly at Russia's military leadership. So this was a rising storm, but I'm not going to comment on the intelligence itself.
The dismantling of the Wagner Group. First of all, do you believe it's being dismantled? And if so, what does this mean in Africa and Syria?
Too soon to tell. We'll see if this means that Wagner forces are coming out of Ukraine. I mean, the very fact that over the weekend, Wagner forces were coming out of Ukraine and going into Russia and toward Moscow, in and of itself is extraordinary. But where this goes, whether those forces remain in Ukraine, whether they become integrated into the regular Russian military, what it means for Wagner in Africa, too soon to tell. But the fact that this is at the least an added distraction for Putin and for Russia, I think is to the advantage of Ukraine. It continues to move forward with the counteroffensive. These are early days, but they have in hand what they need to be successful. It's going to unfold over weeks and even months. But this just creates another problem for Putin. And keep this in mind too, Chuck. This is just the latest chapter in a book of failure that Putin has written for himself and for Russia. Economically, militarily, its standing in the world, all of those things have plummeted. We have a united NATO that's stronger than ever before, a Europe that is weaning itself off of Russian energy, Ukraine that Putin has managed to alienate and unite at the same time. Now, with trouble brewing from within, this, as I said, just adds more questions that he has to find answers for.
I know that with no changes to their nuclear posture, was there open communication on that front, military to military, on the nuclear issue over the weekend or not?
Chuck, I'm not going to get into what diplomatic or other communications we had with Russia, but of course, we're very focused anytime there's instability in a major country like Russia, particularly one with nuclear weapons. There has been no change in their nuclear posture. There's no change in our nuclear posture, but it's something that we're watching very carefully.
Does the instability give you hope that there's an opening for the American citizens that are being held captive in Russia right now, or do you fear there's going to be a clampdown and this will make it harder?
I don't want to speculate on that. We're, as always, regardless of anything else that's happening, intensely focused on making sure that we do everything possible to bring home Americans who are unjustly or arbitrarily detained, including in Russia. That focus will remain.
Does this go to full speed ahead for the Ukraine counteroffensive? Is this a moment of opportunity?
Chuck, it is full speed ahead for the counteroffensive, but they have a plan, and they have a very deliberate plan. They're prosecuting that plan, and we have more than 50 countries that continue to support them in that effort to make sure that they have everything they need to do as well as they can in taking back the land that was seized from them by Russia over the last 16 months. That is in train, but it's going to take some time, weeks, maybe even months. There are very strong defenses that the Russians have built up in recent months that the Ukrainians are working their way through. But at the end of the day, the bottom line really is this, and it's the reason that Ukraine will prevail. This is about their land. This is about their future. This is about their freedom, not Russia's. And that is, in a sense, the real difference maker that you're going to see unfold.
We originally booked you to talk about your China visit. That's why you were.
Okay, so enough of that. This is still an extremely dangerous situation. I think this actually gets us even closer now to a possible nuclear conflict. I am not sure what is going on with the Russian army. The Wagner group has been used extensively in Ukraine. The Russian army, the actual Russian army, not present to the level that I think we really would have expected to see, quite honestly. It makes me wonder what is going on with the Russian military, why we're not seeing a greater actual Russian military presence. And as things ramp up, it's one of two things. Either the Russian military isn't as extensive or as expansive in size as we have been led to believe, or Putin has been completely preserving his forces, which are said to be somewhere around 1 million troops, preserving those while using Wagner forces on the front lines to take the hits. If it's the first one, if it's the first scenario where the Russian military is maybe not as large as we have been led to believe, it puts us in peril. Because if the Ukrainian forces continue to push forward, and we know that the U.S. objective here really ultimately, what they would like it to be as far as an outcome, is the overthrow of Putin and regime change in Russia. If Putin sees this as an existential threat and he really doesn't have the forces to push back, and I'm just speculating because there is no way for me, or really, I don't even know if anyone really knows how large the Russian military actually is. But if he's weaker than we think, he does have the nukes, both tactical and otherwise. And if push comes to shove, if that's the fallback position, if that is what he has to defend Russia, then the world might be in a lot of trouble. And this instability that has been created inside Russia as a result of what we've seen over the last 48 hours also creates, well, opportunity for Ukrainian forces, NATO forces, US forces in Ukraine to advance. And that, again, gets us closer to a possible nuclear conflict. Russia has this massive border now to defend because NATO has pushed right up against his borders all the way around. Finland, Sweden, Poland, Ukraine. Massive country. The largest landmass country in the world, along with Canada, to defend. I mean, those borders are huge, massive, leaving the borders extremely vulnerable. NATO forces, Ukrainian forces, they could pour in from just about any location. And if you don't have the conventional military to defend that, then you can see where it's going. And we have tactical nukes now stationed in Belarus. Now, where does Prigozhin fit into all of this now? Well, we know that Putin had ordered all of the Wagner forces to sign contracts to join and become integrated into the actual Russian military. I don't think Prigozhin liked it. It essentially terminated his business model. He was out of a job. And because he isn't in the Russian military, he's not a general, he has no rank, he becomes obsolete. That, I think, is part of what this has been about. And so now we see that these soldiers will still be offered positions within the Russian military. Prigozhin himself, I think he's on thin ice, even though I think the Russian military, I think Putin knows that the CIA has had a hand in manipulating everything that has gone on. The reality is Prigozhin still turned his forces toward Moscow, and they were heading for the capital to do whatever it is that they were planning to do. Was it just to have meetings with generals? Well, along the way, we saw video of some top brass in the Russian military and hierarchy of command meeting with him and kind of sitting back and listening to what he had to say. That gave rise to more concern about how stable the Russian government might actually be. And everything continued to flow from there. I said that Prigozhin from this point on should sleep with one eye open. That is because even though maybe they've buried the hatchet publicly, maybe he has a legal reassurance that he won't be charged, there won't be any ramifications from what he has done, I think his life is still in peril. I don't think he's safe at all, folks, because he still turned his troops toward Moscow. Therefore, hard to trust him, regardless of the circumstances, even if they've come to the conclusion that he was doing it for patriotic reasons. The reality is he turned his sights on Russia itself and the Russian regime, the Russian military, which is the Russian government. Not wise, in my view. Now, the only thing that would save him in that regard would be that this was a double, triple, quadruple mind screw, information warfare coming back from Russia to counter some sort of a CIA plot to initiate a color revolution within the country of some kind, or an actual coup, or maybe an assassination of top generals, or maybe Putin himself. All of it choreographed through information warfare and shadowy activities by the CIA within Russia, targeting very specific people. Information warfare, mind control has been taken to an art level, I think, especially by agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency. It's what they do. We've seen it time and again through history. And what makes me think again that I'm absolutely on the right track, along with some other very smart people, smarter than me, is a post like this, acknowledging or giving distribution to a statement from Russian MFA releasing this, a peculiar statement. Right as the Wagner hysteria was coming to a close, Russia called out US-led sponsored wars and brought up past failed CIA black ops, such as the Bay of Pigs. Is the Russian government hinting they just foiled another CIA stunt? This posted by Clandestine at War Clandestine on Twitter. And this is the actual post from MFA Russia. US-led sponsored wars have a similar pattern. Humiliating defeat, hasty retreat, abandoned allies. The result, wasted taxpayers' money and human lives lost. And then Bay of Pigs, 1961. Saigon, 1975. Kabul, 2021. Kiev, coming soon. And images right here. Saigon, 1975. Kabul, 2021. It's a strange post, but if you stand back, take a look at the wider picture, you can see sort of what they're saying. They're saying, hey, USA, CIA, we think that you were involved in this, but we're on to you, and nice try. Close, but no cigar. But boy, it sure did get people excited, didn't it? It sure did raise a lot of concerns. And then there's Patrick Lancaster, who has done and continues to do amazing work as a journalist covering the special military operation in Ukraine. He was in Rostov-on-Don when Wagner was standing down and Prigozhin came back into that city of about 1 million people after their troops had been turned around and were coming back from the direction of Moscow, came into the center of town there, where the Wagner troops had taken control of the city. And Patrick Lancaster, this is amazing stuff. What he did, I'm just going to run a brief clip of this, but he actually got a very brief interview with Prigozhin as he was riding in a vehicle. This blew me away. What he did, he was able to talk to the guy and get this actual clip. This is troops were in full control of this city. Here it comes. Look at what he was able to get here.
Как результат сегодня? Как результат сегодня? Результат сегодня. Результат нормально. Нормально? Всех бодрили. Счастливо. Счастливо. So we just got a short little interview there with the head of the Wagner Group as he was leaving the area here in Central Rostov. That was Prigozhin.
Is that amazing or what? I think it's amazing. That's amazing, amazing on the ground work. Patrick Lancaster, great journalist, doing incredible stuff over there. He's been covering the war or this conflict from the very beginning in Ukraine. So a huge salute to Patrick Lancaster for all he's doing there. Let's take a brief break. More to come on this subject when we come back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So again, this whole scenario over the past couple of days, this whole situation, it has really strengthened the position of Ukraine. It has given fuel to the NATO equation, to the U.S. position. This gives the United States, Ukraine a lot. It hasn't really helped Russia at all. And that's again why I'm thinking that the U.S. has had a hand in this. And, they're making the most of it. Ukraine making the most of it here tonight. Zelensky posting this video as he addresses not just the people of Ukraine, but the world, and amping up his own information war. We're launching this information warfare attack and taking direct aim at Putin himself. Here's Zelensky. To Ukrainians, all the people of the world, good health to you, he says. Today is a day when there definitely should be no silence, and we definitely need leadership. Today, the world saw that the bosses of Russia do not control anything, nothing at all. Complete chaos, complete absence of any predictability. And it is happening on Russian territory, which is fully loaded with weapons. We all remember how the head of Russia threatened the world in 2021. He had some ultimatums. He was trying to show a kind of strength. The year 2022 showed that he confused his illusions and the lies he was fed with strength. Then the Kremlin are capable of resorting to any terror, capable of resorting to any stupidity, but they cannot provide even 1% of the necessary control. And they are the real problem. In one day, they lost several of their million-plus cities, and showed all Russian bandits, mercenaries, oligarchs, and anyone else how easy it is to capture Russian cities and probably arsenals with weapons. Now, it is very important that no one in the world remains silent because of being afraid of this Russian chaos. All the actions of the leaders now can be historic. Every word of journalists is worth its weight in gold. It is necessary to clearly name the source of the problem. And if someone in the world tries to ignore the situation, if someone in the world is under the illusion that the Kremlin is capable of regaining control, this only postpones the problem until the next breakthrough of chaos, even more dangerous. We all know the solution. First, the world should not be afraid. We know that only our unity protects us. Ukraine will definitely be able to protect Europe from any Russian forces, and it doesn't matter who commands them. We will protect the security of Europe's eastern flank. It depends only on our defense. And that is why every manifestation of support for our defense is support for your defense. Everyone in the free world, Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian guns, Ukrainian tanks, Ukrainian missiles are all that protect Europe. Well, it's not Ukrainian. It's all NATO provided arms, man. It's German and English and US and Canadian and, well, you name it. You name your NATO country, they're sending you the arms, man. Ukrainian tanks, right? From such marches as seated in Russian territory. And when we asked to give us the F-16 fighters or the ATACMS, we're enhancing our common defense, real defense. This is what is needed. Now is the time to provide all the weapons necessary for defense. Send more money. Second, everything must be real. It's time for everyone in the world to frankly say that all of Russia's criminal actions against Ukraine were and are unprovoked. Oh, yeah. And we all have to focus exclusively on our common security priorities. NATO is not just a word or a set of formal promises. These are reliable guarantees for everyone that peace won't be destroyed without Ukraine. Such guarantees are worthless. Already in July at the summit in Vilnius, it is, I missed that, for real decisions without looking back at Russia. Any nation that borders Russia really supports this. And the third, I will say it in Russian. The man from the Kremlin is obviously very afraid and probably hiding somewhere, not showing himself. I'm sure that he is no longer in Moscow. He calls somewhere and asks something. He knows what he is afraid of. He himself created this threat. All evil, all losses, all hatred, he himself who spreads it. And the longer he can run between his bunkers, the more you will all lose, all who are connected with Russia. What will we Ukrainians do? We will defend our country. We will defend our freedom. We will not be silent and we will not be inactive. We know how to win, and it will happen. Our victory in this war will definitely be. And what will you do? The longer your troops stay on Ukrainian land, the more devastation they will bring to Russia. The longer this person is in the Kremlin, the more disasters there will be. And now I'm switching to my native language. Thanks to our soldiers. Thanks to everyone who is now beating the occupiers. Thanks to the Air Force for protecting our skies. Glory to Ukraine. We will defeat everyone. Blah, 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 blah. I don't think Putin even wants to take all of Ukraine, honestly. I think he's just trying to purge a certain degree of the Ukrainian fighting forces to denazify the country, as he put it. And yes, even the New York Times has now acknowledged that they do have Nazis in Ukraine, and they are an integral part of the Ukrainian military operation. Yes, they've been around since World War II. Yes, they actually wear Nazi symbols on their uniforms and fly Nazi symbols from their vehicles. Provable. It's all right there for anyone who cares to actually look. And no, I don't think Putin wants to go into Europe. So this claim that it's only Ukraine standing between a Russian massive invasion of Europe and Europe itself, because the Ukraine is the only thing preventing that. I'd say think again. I don't think that anything of the sort is on the table. I don't think that's a realistic scenario at all. I think Russia has its hands full with what's going on just in Ukraine. And I think really they're focused on the Donbass region and securing that. And I think in the end, that's probably what you'll see settled for. And probably within the next year, you hopefully will see some sort of a resolution to this, a negotiated settlement. But who knows? This has dragged on longer than most people expected it would, including just about every expert who has weighed in on the subject. So who the heck really knows? But I see no evidence. I've seen no evidence to indicate that Russia wants to go beyond Ukraine to invade the rest of Europe. I don't think Putin has any interest in that at all, and there is no strategic advantage for him to do so. That kind of talk is just rhetoric designed to build up support for the NATO operations, and it's a way for Zelensky to hold out his hands again and ask for more money. Speaking of money, I noticed that just this past week, the U.S. government acknowledged that I think there was about $6 billion that they can't even account for. So they're looking at all of that. You take that, and then you also look at what Senators Blumenthal and Graham had to say about what NATO would do in response to the use of a tactical nuclear weapon of any kind on Ukrainian soil by Russia, or if there was any kind of an attack on a nuclear power plant as a result of this military operation. And they said that if there was any of that kind of activity, then instantly Russia would be at war with NATO. Further escalation, further provocation directly from Blumenthal and Graham. And do you think the timing on that is coincidental? I think not. I think that it's directly tied into everything that we've been watching over the past couple of days. Again, suggesting to me that the CIA was definitely trying to manipulate this situation. I think that they knew, they clued into the fact that there was no love lost between the Russian defense minister, Shoigu, and the leader of the Wagner group, Prigozhin. And I think they exploited that. And they found ways to manipulate the situation so that it escalated into exactly what you just saw. And I don't think that's far-fetched at all. And so, as a result of all that, Prigozhin, I think honestly, he's in deep trouble. He might have the agreement. The people, who knows really ultimately in the long run, but he has the support of a lot of the people because the messaging that he was able to get out and distribute to the people of Russia was such that he presents himself as a patriot, as something of a hero, fighting for Russia, not an insurrectionist. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I mean, if you look at the way this has played out, it sort of has echoes of J6 in a sort of a way. That's sort of what this reminds me of, the way that the language is being used, the Wagner forces, Prigozhin, speaking in terms of patriotism as they advance on their own capital with force behind them. And we know that, there was some conflict, apparently. It's hard to tell exactly how much. Apparently some helicopters may have been shot down. Everything that, all this information is kind of coming out, but in the fog of war, it's hard to know exactly what is true, what isn't true, what's accurate. And sometimes it's not even about truth. It's more about accuracy. So some of the information that we do have is that we know that there are reports, whether this is accurate or not, that 15 Russian soldiers were killed. And most of those soldiers apparently were killed because some helicopters were shot down by Wagner forces. The deal, though, is that regardless of what has happened, Prigozhin will not face criminal charges. And he is now going to go to Belarus, where he will enjoy the protection of Belarusian President Lukashenko. And there's supposed to be some changes in the Russian military leadership, but we don't know exactly what that looks like. So it looks like Putin has agreed to shuffle some people because of what Prigozhin has done and the demands that he made. And all the Wagner fighters are going back to the front lines where they are supposed to fight for Russia again. And we don't even know exactly where Prigozhin is. I think the last time really that we can say for certain where he was when Patrick Lancaster spoke to him from the back when he was in the back of that vehicle about to leave town in Rostov-on-Don. And now we're also seeing that Zelensky is expressing disappointment with the final outcome of this because the Wagner forces turned around and didn't advance on the capital. So it didn't quite work out the way that Zelensky and I'm sure the White House, the way they were hoping, and certainly the CIA officials who I think were playing with this at least. And I think we'd have to be naive to think that the United States was not directly involved in this. In fact, I was looking at newsreel footage from 1975. It was a year in review video. It was a newscast, a special newscast from 1975. And it brought back a lot of memories. And as one of the main stories that came to the surface, came to light back in 75 when Gerald Ford was the president after Nixon. One of the top stories of the year was CIA being involved in assassinations in other countries. And it was a very controversial thing. It was, there were investigations that were taking place. You look back at 1975 and I thought, wow, in reality, so little has changed. There was also a story from 75 about the government, the CIA, opening mail, U.S. citizens' mail to spy on people, especially any mail coming from Russia. And of course, Vietnam was still a big issue back in 75. I'm telling you, man, the United States has been at this for a very long time. 1975, they were engaging in all this kind of honestly illegal activity way back in the 70s. And I'm sure even long before that in the 60s and probably long before that. They've been doing it for a long time. You don't think they're not engaged in this kind of stuff now? They're better at it now than they ever were. Like I said, the first night that this was all sort of happening and this story was evolving, I said, the CIA tactics have evolved to a very sophisticated level. It's not like it used to be where they would fly over enemy territory and dump leaflets from helicopters to try to propagandize their enemy. It's not like they would just sit there and beam radio signals, Good Morning Vietnam style with Robin Williams into enemy territory to convince them to give up. It's much more sophisticated now. We have research that has been done into psychological warfare, and we combine that with social media and then actual physical kinetic things that they do in the field, and it gets to be pretty heavy duty, man. They have mass mind control programs, they have targeted mind control programs, they have very sophisticated information warfare tools at their disposal, and I am certain that you're seeing this play out right before us, and we're being subjected to it right now on our side just by watching that Anthony Blinken clip on NBC. Don't kid yourself. That's all part of the program. What we're seeing play out on both sides actually is, an information war. It's a propaganda. It's a public relations marketing thing. But it goes far beyond that now. It's not just the surface level marketing of public relations and PR damage control that we're seeing on the Russian side and the gloating and the follow-up commentary that comes from the NATO US side. It runs much deeper than that, and it's going to continue. But all that being said, tonight, Prigozhin, he turned and was heading toward Moscow. And as I said the other night, some people disagreed with me. I reposted the one section of my commentary from, I guess it was yesterday. Yeah. Where I said that he should sleep with one eye open from now on because he's in danger. And I said he probably doesn't have any friends left. I stand by that. Other people, with a different view on this, some of the comments that I've had come back valid, where they're saying, yeah, the US probably has been very involved in this. And as a result, because Russia realizes that it was some sort of a psyop that laid the groundwork for a lot of what happened, Prigozhin sort of might be forgiven, and that maybe Russia has been engaged in some sort of theatrics here, political and information warfare theatrics, in order to kind of do a double mind screw on NATO and the US. And as a result, Prigozhin really doesn't have anything to worry about because he's still on side. I'm not sure that I would go quite that far. In fact, I'm not going that far at this point. The other scenario that is being laid out is that Prigozhin is something of a hero now, and that he has really, what was the one comment that I saw come in? It was a Roman triumph. He was handed a Roman triumph. And I thought, well, that's an interesting take on it too, and some validity to it. And what is a Roman triumph? It's basically where a military leader like Prigozhin or a general delivers incredible victory for the country, for the elite powers that they serve. But in the course of scoring those victories, he's treated almost like, well, kind of like a king for a day. So that procession on the way to Moscow was essentially Prigozhin sort of taking his moments in the spotlight and asserting his authority and forcing his elite masters to acknowledge his king for a day status. And because he has become as powerful as he appeared to be yesterday, standing in defiance of some of the Russian generals that he believes are corrupt, without fear that he essentially will eventually be given maybe even his own territory to command or something to that effect. I disagree with all of that on that level. I think that he is still portrayed as, I think that he's viewed as a hero, as we saw the people in Rostov-on-Don welcoming him, greeting him with open arms, cheering for him even as a fighter of corruption and a hero of Russia because of the military victories he had secured in the Donbass and in Bakhmut. But I think he's in a dangerous place now because those forces are going to be integrated into the Russian military. He won't have them. He is essentially going to be exiled to Belarus. And he turned his forces against Putin. I'd be still sleeping with one eye open. He's in peril. In the long run, I don't think this is over for him. It might not happen right away. But like I said yesterday, wouldn't it be unfortunate for him if he just accidentally sort of fell out of a window or got into a car and the brakes failed, or was sleeping one night and didn't wake up because someone came in and assassinated him by giving him a bullet to the head? Maybe someone very close to him who was put up to the task by someone. I don't know. But when you go up against your master and then you stand down, you've backed yourself into a corner. You've either not, you've maybe gone too far, or you maybe haven't gone far enough, if you get my drift. And now you're kind of cut off at the knees. In the long run, you're very vulnerable. And who are you going to turn to? Who's your friend? Who can you trust? There were some people claiming, as the convoy was rolling toward Moscow, that Prigozhin was getting intelligence from the CIA directly. And there are some people asserting tonight, again, smart people, that he kind of turned and there's all kinds of evidence now to suggest that he was becoming an asset of the West. And Putin stood right there and said that he was guilty of treason, but now saying, "Oh, we won't convict you. We won't lay any charges. Just go to Belarus. It'll be fine. You can live there." I would not want to be in Prigozhin's shoes. This is a guy too, has a lot to live for. Extremely rich, billionaire, owns his own movie production company. He was also, instrumental behind the information warfare campaign that was taking place back in 2016 during the election in the United States. And it is true, he did do it, and he has admitted to it. Not at first he didn't, but he has since acknowledged that his company was hired to conduct information warfare campaigns in the United States during the election, the US election. US intelligence ultimately concluding that those activities were not significant enough to sway the election one way or the other, but those activities were present. And the overall objective behind the information warfare they were waging on social media at the time was simply to disrupt, not to get a specific outcome in the election, but just to disrupt everything, to cause as much chaos as possible within the United States during the election. That seems to be part of what the whole strategy continues to be. I can say this. I think the Russians are okay at information warfare, but I think that their approach in many respects is kind of basic, maybe even crude compared to what the CIA engages in. You can see the results of the CIA efforts, but you never really know for sure where the information is being dumped in, or exactly how the conduits are being set up, or how they're going about manipulating the situation. But you can see it in various countries. There are certain telltale signs that pop up when you see protests, huge numbers of people spilling out into the streets to protest particular issues, like what we saw in Iran just recently with the death of that woman, where the narrative got spun up that this woman had been murdered, and then this whole campaign globally started to generate outrage over it, so that you saw protests not just in Iran, but all over the world, in the United States, in Canada, and other countries. That's the CIA. As tragic as that incident was, the Iranian government at the time argued that they said that the woman was not murdered, that she wasn't beaten or anything of the nature, that she died of natural causes. But nevertheless, what do you believe? And as a result, that's one of the techniques, right? You know, a lot of people dying is a statistic. One person dying is a human being. Well, they focused on that one individual. And my assessment is that the US government, that Justin Trudeau in Canada and these other world leaders who latched onto that story and ran with the narrative themselves, and then even organized some of their own protests. And we saw Justin Trudeau standing on Parliament Hill the one day at a protest speaking about that very issue. My assessment of that is that these leaders didn't really care a hill of beans about that woman. They're simply political opportunists, and they were trying to destabilize things in Iran as much as possible, especially because of Iran's connection and support of what Russia is doing. They have an alliance that's formed, and they've been providing these low-cost attack drones to the Russian military for use in the special military operation in Ukraine. That is largely what I think that whole thing was about. CIA. What happened over the last 48 hours in Russia? CIA. It's got it like written all over it, man. That's the way it works. But Prigozhin, my friend, not that I know you, one eye open. I'll be right back. Don't go away.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
And speaking of information warfare, this is related. It's not, we're moving on from the Coup story or whatever it was. But this is tied in. Information warfare. New York Times. Wall Street Journal. I'm not going to tell you who I'm talking about, but a good friend of mine, I was talking to him, and politically, we don't see eye to eye, and it's not surprising because he gets all of his news from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Good friend, been friends for years. But when I sit and talk to him, it becomes, for me, an exercise in understanding the other side, understanding why some people think the way they do, why he thinks the way he does. And man, is it an eye opener. You know, they say you are what you eat. I would say your brain is what you consume in terms of information. You are what you read, you are what you watch. Well, he sure is. And I think it's sad. He thinks he's informed. And I'm not criticizing him, and he's free to believe whatever he wants. But just sitting speaking with him, it was shocking. Again, every time I sit and speak with him, and I meet with him just periodically here and there, and I met him over the weekend, had a conversation. And these are some of the things that were shared with me. And for this friend of mine, it's just, these are just comments in passing, as all like they're just statements of fact for him. So first thing that comes to mind is he said, all those Russians, they're terrible people. I thought, the Russian people are terrible? Russian people are terrible. Not the Russian government. He didn't refer to specifically Putin or any of the military leaders or anything like that. No, it's the Russian people. The Russian people, those Russian people are terrible. And I thought, my God, like, talk about prejudice. But that's what happens when war is being waged. If you go back to World War II, the way people were fed information about, say, the Japanese, very similar. And it breeds prejudice, bigotry that lingers with people for the rest of their lives, becomes embedded. You can't really purge it. It's very difficult. And then it becomes part of your culture, your society, and it takes generations to wash a lot of that away. But this is the result of my friend, I'm certain, as he said to me in the conversation, he said, I get all my news from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and I don't watch or read anything else. That's where I get my news. I thought, well, that's pretty limited. But that's one of the things he said to me that just shocked me. The Russian people are terrible. People are people. They've got kids, they've got families, they want to live in peace, they want to go to work and earn a living and do something productive and meaningful with their lives. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what country you live in. I don't care what the color of your skin is. I'm certain that when Russians wake up in the morning, they they get their kids breakfast and hug them and send them off to school and try to live their lives the same way we do here, in their own way. And that's what freedom is about, man. Like, doesn't make them terrible people. Doesn't make us terrible people either. But man, the mainstream media, in conjunction with government and people with terrible intentions, can certainly twist people's minds and take people into a very dark place, can't they? What else did he have to say? 8 billion people on the planet. We're doomed. Too many people. Got to get rid of some of the people. He has said that to me many times. And that blows my mind. I don't think he even hears himself saying it. I don't think he even understands what that means. And yet, the people who subscribe to that kind of thinking, they're buying into a narrative that ultimately leads to a really dark place, doesn't it? Because if you need to reduce the population, what measures might be taken to accomplish that? Well, there are only so many kinds of things that could be done to reduce the world population. And he's all in on climate change, right? Because too many people, too many cars, too many people driving. Everybody wants a car, and we can't have that. Meanwhile, he's driving around in his high-end SUV. Do these folks even see the hypocrisy? Do they hear what they're saying? Do they understand that what they're advocating for is population reduction, which can only mean either, birth control to the point where we have fewer people being born, so over time we get a population reduction, or you have to kill people somehow, or let them die somehow. Like that's where it takes us. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that we're doomed. I think that we as human beings always have ways to find solutions to problems. Predictions of us all starving to death that have been made for decades and centuries even because of overpopulation have simply not come to pass. Thanks to technology, advances in agriculture, and other things, we've been able to persevere, prosper, literally prosper. And I think in spite of government, not because of it, where government sees everything as a zero-sum game, that's not the case. That's not really what's happened. But my friend, too many people in the world, Russians are bad people, got to win the Ukraine war. It's all about democracy. Yeah, we have to defend Ukraine, a country where Zelensky is jailing journalists, allowing the targeting of journalists, putting them on a kill list. He's canceled elections, shut down television stations that have had any kind of critic on there, holding him accountable for his actions. It's insane. Also, anybody involved in the freedom movement is crazy. All the freedom people are crazy. They're crazy people on all sides, man. That's the nature of the world. But it doesn't mean the entire movement is crazy, but that's what he says. Because why? Because he gets all of his news from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. I said, you really, you're only getting part of the picture. You don't really know fully what's going on. And you know what he said to me? He said, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. That's cool, man. Ignorance is bliss. And oh my goodness. I feel sorry for him in a way. But when you're an adult, I don't think there's any excuse for ignorance on that level. It bothers me and it saddens me. And I can't have a really good conversation with him because we just get to a certain point. He doesn't want to hear anything different. And, it sort of ends there. On the issues of like the pandemic and the masks. I mean, he's woke all the way down the line. I don't know. How do we get back to a place of civil discourse? I'm not sure. I just like to get people closer to the truth if we can. And yet even our scientists, our experts, seem to have been corrupted in so many ways. And that's why when we come back after this, I'm going to talk to you about a new study that says we better be afraid, very, very afraid of man's best friend.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I'm back. And yeah, you can support the channel by donating at freedomreporters.com. Let me put that up on the screen there before we get into this next story. freedomreporters.com. Well, anyway, that's where you can donate. Donate at freedomreporters.com, or you can also support the channel at maverickdonations.com. And I hate even asking for support, but that's the reality of it. And honestly, we need it. I need to recharge that phone system. That alone is going to take at least another $500, and that's got to come from someplace. We don't get monetized on YouTube. We're not monetized on any social media platform. They demonetized us on YouTube. And we don't have any corporate sponsors. Everything depends on you guys. If you want the show to continue, you have to support the show. We need your help. It's just that simple. I've got expenses that we have to cover here. So truly appreciate those of you who have donated. If you're able to, if you can, we certainly appreciate it. And those are the addresses to go to. freedomreporters.com. You don't have to have a PayPal account. You can just go there and donate. You can also donate in the Rumble rants over on Rumble. That's always helpful. And you can even just support the channel by sharing and liking these live streams, these videos that we post. We're trying to get away from YouTube and Facebook, but that's where the bulk of our audience is. So please share on Facebook, share like crazy. The audience continues to grow there. Everything is very positive overall, even though they've, kind of tried to suppress us a bit, just even in the past week there, a little bit. Nothing huge, not so far. But in the face of bills C11 and C18 in Canada, we're still working against that. Over on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you do, I hate to use that cliche, but hit that bell, the notification bell, and that will make sure that the notifications go out to you every time we post a new video so that you don't miss anything that we do post. If you just subscribe, it helps a little bit, but it doesn't mean all that much to the overall scenario because they don't always send you out the notifications, and they have absolutely been suppressing us for well over a year now. What can I say about that? Except go to Rumble and subscribe over there too, because we're growing there, and that is more of a free speech platform. I've noticed too that people are falling back into their old habits. I know that a lot of you don't you prefer the YouTube layout for the chat and everything, and that's where a big part of the community is in the YouTube chat. But we have a lot of people watching on Facebook who, comment over there too. In fact, actually, I think more on Facebook now than YouTube. And yeah, absolutely, across all the pages. And there's still a chat function over on the Rumble channel, and we're getting more and more people there too. But a lot of people have kind of shifted back over to YouTube. So I wish there was some way we could combine those things, but it's just not possible. But we're trying to focus more on Rumble. Anyway, enough of all that talk for the moment, because we have, huge news from this past week where there's this new study that has come out. Dogs could become more hostile to humans as the planet heats up. This reminds me sort of the movie series Planet of the Apes. Only it's now Planet of the Dogs. And it's not so much that the dogs talk, but they're going, man's best friend is being turned against humans because of climate change. Dun, 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 dun. When I heard this story this week, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And this is a story that's being distributed all over the world. Let's take a look at it, shall we? And then I've got a special treat for you because I have initiated my own scientific investigation as a result of this study. So I decided we're going to figure out if it's actually true. Now, I mean, look at that dog. He's one hot dog, isn't he? He's hot dogging out there. Look at those fangs. Dog attacks have become more common on hot and polluted days. Troubling new research has warned. Right here it says, this is from Euronews.green. Climate change could make dog bites more common. New research. Dogs are 11% more likely to attack people on days with higher UV levels, according to Harvard Medical School research. Well, it's got to be true then if the research was done at Harvard. Previous studies have linked high temperatures and air pollution to increased aggression in humans, rats, and monkeys. Now it appears warming weather could turn man's best friend against us. Dun, 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 dun. Very dramatic. Cue the horror movie music. Dogs, where the interactions between humans and dogs are more hostile on hot, sunny, and smoggy days, the study authors conclude. The societal burden of extreme heat and air pollution also includes the costs of animal aggression. I'm so scared. How will climate change make dogs more aggressive? Well, the study published in the Nature Journal this month examined data on dog bites in 8 U.S. cities between 2009 and 2018. The data set included 69,525 reported dog bites, an average of 3 bites per day over 10 years. They found dog bites increased by 11% on days with higher UV levels. That's ultraviolet light, by the way. 4% on hotter days, and 3% on days with increased ozone levels. Dog bites slightly decreased by 1% on days with high rainfall. Well, that's probably because people are inside, not outside with dogs. Might not have anything to do with the level of sunlight or light or even the temperature at that point. Maybe it's because people are not outside exposing themselves to dogs because it's raining. Anyway, the study did not include information about other factors like dog breed, sex, or whether the dog had been neutered or spayed. Or maybe people weren't outside as much. However, the researchers speculated that hot weather makes dogs more aggressive, just like it does their owners. If you've ever felt your blood boiling as the mercury climbs, you're not alone. High temperatures can increase heart rate, blood pressure, sweating, and make it harder to catch your breath, contributing to heightened feelings of stress. Heat waves can also cause testosterone production to surge. Toxic masculinity. Increasing feelings of aggression. You know what I've seen dogs do on hot days? Lay down and pant. Just saying. According to an American study spanning 45 years, violent attacks increase in warm years and seasons. Nonviolent crimes are unaffected by temperature. The season, yet when it's hotter outside, you know what? You actually get, when in warm weather, you get more crime because criminals come outside more. If it's minus 40 degrees out, they tend to stay inside. When it warms up, they go out and they break into cars and homes and they assault people on the street because they're outside. Again, check the methodology of your research, folks. As climate change bites, the globe is heating up. How much will climate change increase global temperatures? Human-induced warming reached approximately 1 degree Celsius in 2017. We are on track for a 1.5 degree increase in 2024. Really? Seriously. It was a warm day here, but I don't know what it was like where you're at, but I'm having a little trouble sinking my teeth into this one. The UN has warned that existing climate pledges provide no credible pathway to preventing temperature rises above 1.5 degrees on pre-industrial levels. At 1.5 degrees Celsius warning, about 14% of Earth's population will be exposed to severe heat waves at least once every 5 years. Well, at 2 degrees warming, that number jumps to 37%. Blah, 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 blah. And we're all doomed because this dog is going to come and eat your brains. Man's best friend is being turned against humans because of climate change. I'm a quaking in my shoes. I'm afeard of my dog. I'm afeard. So today, I decided to conduct my own scientific climate change canine experiment, research, investigation to get to the bottom of all of this. So I thought I'd share the results of that research with you tonight, right here on the Maverick News Channel. This might well be the most important work I've ever done as a journalist. Brace yourselves, folks. This video that I'm about to run for you is disturbing, riveting, informative, controversial, but very important. And viewer discretion is definitely advised. Folks, I'm going to finally introduce you to Cosmo. Okay, so we're out for our walk with Cosmo, and scientists are saying that canines are going cuckoo, crazy, because of climate change. And as the weather warms up, as the planet gets hotter, dogs will become more vicious, potentially becoming a threat to humanity. So today, I thought we'd take a stroll, not just to examine the weather, but to examine the effects of the weather on Cosmo. Aggressive panting, aggressive galloping. It was hot, so hot. The UV levels were off the charts. Toxic clouds above. chemical-laden, poisoning us all from above.
Run! Run!
Walking me, not me walking him. Vicious. You see? Right there. Aggressive play biting. Aggressive sniffing. He smells something in the air, probably the toxic chem clouds. No regard for public urination. Completely disregarding those bylaws. So he just doesn't care. It's just too damn hot. Look what he did. Yep, that was it. Just nod my hand off at the wrist. Took it right off. Nothing left of it. Right down to the bone. Panting, aggressive panting again. And again, no regard for the bylaws when it comes to that kind of activity. Horrific. And he doesn't. Look, he's happy about it. He turns and smiles, much to my horror. And that was my scientific investigation into the effects of climate change on canines. Very scary stuff. So if you have a dog, if your neighbor has a dog, if you see a dog, beware. They may turn on you at any time because of climate change. Canine climate chaos, driving dogs cuckoo. Anyway, folks, that gets us to 7:55 p.m. here on this. What is today? Is the 25th of June, 2023. And with that, I am going to wrap it up a little bit early on this Sunday evening. A little bit of sunshine still out there. I can see. You may notice that sometimes the lighting here isn't quite right. That's because they were working on the windows here, and it's kind of screwed up the lighting at certain times of the day. We still don't have the window coverings in place in this studio to control all the lighting here. So that's why things have been looking a little bit different in the last couple of weeks. Soon to be rectified. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Again, please consider supporting the channel at freedomreporters.com or maverickdonations.com. Like, share, subscribe across all the different media platforms, social media platforms that we're on, and I will be back tomorrow night. Really appreciate you guys spending the time with me this evening, and I will catch you all mañana on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia Productions.